Hello, Pastor Stewart here with another midweek Bible study video. We continue reading some selections from the book of Psalms these days, and today we come to Psalm 91. All the Psalms that we've been reading and thinking about during this Bible study video series were quoted in the New Testament as well. So it showed that these Old Testament Psalms stuck around in the minds of the New Testament people and writers and first Christians. Now, what's very interesting about this one, this Psalm, Psalm 91, is quoted in Matthew 4:6 and Luke 4:10, and I'll put those references down in the video description below. That is the same story that is repeated and told in both the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. The person who quotes this psalm is, in fact, the devil himself. So we will talk about which verses he quotes as we read through it today. Now, this psalm is a psalm of thanks and praise, which is nice because it seems like a lot of the psalms we've been reading the last few weeks have been kind of downers. They've been sad. They've been good and honest and have helped us express some feelings of grief and depression, which is good. But it's nice to kind of get more of a joyful, celebratory, praising kind of feel for this psalm this week. It's from an individual, and it's about the personal benefits of having faith in God and how it can help you get through hard times. Now, in this psalm, it'll list a lot of different names and titles for God, lots of different imagery for God, and a lot of illustrations and imagery to illustrate what God protects us from and how God walks with us and is present with us in spite of the challenges that we face. And you'll definitely see that the running theme again in this psalm is that God is a refuge. God is like a shelter from life's storms. God is a strong fortress that we can go to. And we've seen that in a couple of psalms that we've read over the past few weeks, like Psalm 31 especially. It seems like God being a refuge for safety and security and peace was an interesting running theme throughout the book of Psalms. Now, when we read this psalm, it will talk about dangers in life and how God can protect us from those dangers. Some dangers that we face in life, all we need to do is find a physical shelter and we can be protected. Like if it's raining, we can use an umbrella. If it's strong winds and hail, we can go under a pavilion. If it's, really bad thunder or lightning, we can go inside a building. Like some physical dangers have easy physical shelter and protections. If it's really, really bad, like a awful hurricane or an earthquake, we might need to find like a disaster center that's in a more fortified building. So the greater the danger physically, the greater the shelter we might have to find. That's like kind of nature, physical, worldly stuff. Other threats and challenges, not so much physical. So there's no physical place to go that will help us. So our psalm today sings about the presence of God being the spiritual place that we can go to find safety and relief from the emotional and mental and life dangers and threats that will plague us. So let's jump right in with verses 1-6. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. So, what are some things that the psalmist mentions he is afraid of? First, there's the fowler's snare, which would have been like a bird trap. He also mentions the terror of the night, arrows that fly in the day, And he mentions a pestilence, which would have been like a deadly disease, and a plague that can stalk during the night and can destroy people during the day. And as far as a list of things that scare us now, whoa, that one really hits close to home as we are reading this during a pandemic season. And we have watched starting early on in 2020 as the coronavirus just spread around the world and hit us and continues to plague us. And it's interesting imagery. It says that like the pestilence that stalks by night and it destroys at midday. I think we felt that because we don't know are the people we're around, do they have it? And they haven't developed symptoms yet. They don't know if they have it. We might not know if we have it. And then we're around people and it can drive us just mad. And we're stressed and worried. I remember the very early days of the pandemic when I was still kind of learning about it and didn't know. I was afraid to touch anything. Like I would just stay in my room, in my office. And I didn't want to touch door handles or anything. I was using hand sanitizer just all the time. Anything. I was just so afraid of anything in the world. And now, learning more about it helps me to be responsible and not fear every single surface that I come into contact with. But still, that unknown of, by definition of how this virus acts, we don't know who has it and who is carrying it and who is spreading it. And that is really scary. So those fears that this psalmist is talking about, I think we can really feel them. And it really hits home as we read. So to help him get through, what are some of the things that he says he does? He dwells in the shelter of the Most High. He rests in the shadow of the Almighty. And he finds refuge under God's wings. He says that God is like a rampart, which would have been like a high wall or a tower, like a defensive castle, tower, or wall. So it's interesting that some of his fears are literal. Like maybe he was afraid of arrows in the day. Maybe he was a soldier in battle or something. And literal fears of sickness and disease. But some of his fears were figurative, like illustrations. Fowler's snare would have been a bird trap. So I don't really think he's actually afraid of like stumbling into bird traps and getting hurt or something. I think we can assume that's kind of figurative, like being ensnared, being swayed and conned and taken advantage of, exploited maybe, just kind of that idea of being ensnared by someone who's deceitful and untrustworthy. So some fears were physical and literal. Some are figurative and illustrations. And it seems like he sees the protection and the safety that God offers in the same way. Sometimes God can save us in a literal physical sense, and other times God can save us and protect us, give us peace in a spiritual sense. Like the psalmist says, he rests in the shadow of the Almighty. Well, that would be a spiritual sense of just kind of letting yourself be enfolded in God's peace. So good reminders for us that when we are scared or anxious, we should seek the holy, comforting presence of God and just rest there. We should center ourselves on God and then find God there at our center. Center ourselves. God is there in our hearts. So when the outside world gets crazy, we might need to just close our eyes and find God there at our center ourselves, and just rest in the peace that the Almighty, the Infinite, the Creator is there with us. Sometimes during literal physical dangers, sometimes during emotional, spiritual dangers. Okay, verses 7 through 13. 1,000 people may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you make the Most High your dwelling, even the Lord, who is my refuge, then no harm will befall you, no disaster will come near your tent, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. So, did you hear and recognize the verses from this psalm that are quoted in the New Testament? They were verses 11 through 12, and those were some of the verses that the devil quoted to Jesus when the devil was trying to tempt him. And remember, in that story, the devil tries to tempt him. You're hungry, Jesus. I see you're hungry. You've been fasting. Turn this rock into bread. Or come on up with me to the top of the temple and just go ahead and jump off. Because, as it's written in the Bible, Jesus, the Bible, right? God will send angels, to protect you, so you won't even strike your foot against the stone. And then the third temptation was showing Jesus, like, look at all this land. This can be yours. Everything the light touches. You and me, we can share this together. Just, serve me and you can have all this stuff. So these were some of the verses that the devil used in the Jesus temptation story to try and sway and tempt Jesus. Specifically, these were to jump off the top of the temple and not worry about what might happen. Because, hey, it says in the Bible, God will send angels so that you don't hit your foot on the rocks. Hey, sounds nice. So again, in these verses, we see a combination of literal, physical, and spiritual illustrations. We shouldn't read some of these verses literally and just read them and go traipsing around trying to stomp on snakes and lions like it says that we can. Obviously, that's a bad idea. These verses are not an excuse to just do whatever we want. Those verses are more of a spiritual, figurative sense. So don't go looking for snakes outside and stomp on them just for fun, especially lions. Bad idea. The devil used these verses to try and convince Jesus that he could do whatever he wanted to, not worry about the consequences. Like, hey, it's right there in black and white. It's in the Bible. You won't even hit your foot on the rocks. Angels will come and protect you. Just indulge. Just do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the consequences because you have faith in God. That's the temptation that the devil tries to pitch to Jesus. Now, obviously, Jesus, he's not going to fall for any of those temptations. He's Jesus. He knows what's what. But some of us might. We might fall into that kind of temptation and go, oh, maybe we can just do whatever we want and not have to worry about the consequences. But when the devil tempted Jesus that way in that story, what did he say? Jesus said, you should not put the Lord your God to the test. You shouldn't put God to the test. Don't test God. Don't walk in front of a car, a bus, find a Mack truck coming down the highway, walk out of the interstate and say, God will protect me. I have faith in God. That's not what these verses are saying to do. So when the devil said, yeah, just go ahead and jump off this temple here. God will protect you. That's not really what these verses are talking about. But a lot of people these days think that it's an invitation to just do whatever they feel like and there's no consequences because they have faith. Not so much. So we can think about, as we're kind of pondering that idea, let's go back to the first set of verses, like the deadly pestilence and the disease that it was talking about. So, for example, will having a strong faith keep you from getting something like cancer? If you have a really strong faith, then you won't get sick and get cancer? I think we can say that sadly the answer is no. I have, and I'm sure you have. You've known incredibly faithful people who have contracted diseases or cancer, and it took their physical life. That happens. It doesn't mean that they didn't have faith. It doesn't mean that God is weak. It just means that our our physical human bodies are fragile and they're frail, and that happens. We can think about right now the coronavirus. Like I said, we're all scared about that. If you just have faith in God, does it mean that it's impossible for you to get the coronavirus? No, it doesn't work that way. Diseases and viruses don't work that way. I have known faithful people who have gotten the coronavirus and who have died. I led a funeral service for a woman of great faith who died from coronavirus complications. It happens. Like I said, it doesn't mean that your faith is weak or God is weak. It just means that it's our physical, fragile human bodies that are the weak things. But that's a part of being temporal and in these jars of clay, like Paul says. So notice verses 5 and 6 again. We can go back and check those. It says, verses 5 and 6 said, "You will not fear things like terrors in the night, pestilence, and disease." That's different from saying, put your faith in God and you will never get sick. Okay, the verses don't say that. It says that if you make God your refuge, your shelter, then you will not fear them. That's a difference. Okay, let's read the last verses, 14 through 16. "Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show my salvation." So, in those verses, does God say, if you call upon me, I will make all your troubles disappear? It does not say that. God says, I will be with you in your troubles. There's a difference. And it says that God will deliver us. That means God will be with us every step of the way, alongside us, all the way through and out to the other side, as God delivers us through our challenges and hardships. Now, since we are physical creatures and physical bodies, we get concerned and focus on our physical welfare. But again, just because we get sick or we get hurt, it doesn't mean that God is not with us. It just means our bodies will get sick sometimes. We tend to look around and see our situation in the world through a lens of worldly priorities, the physical, the immediate. But God wants to connect with us from an eternal perspective that is greater and bigger and more far-reaching than the temporary and the physical. So the focus of this Psalm 91 is more about the condition of our hearts than the physical condition of our bodies. And it says that the more we put our trust in God, the less we will fear those kinds of dangers and threats that are outside in the world. The more we can think about the eternal with that eternal perspective, the less we will be bothered by the physical, by what is immediate and happening in front of us. So, very good things to remember as we worry about the deadly pestilence that is claiming hundreds of thousands of lives in our country and millions around the world. So do make God your refuge this week to give you peace and as a refuge from the stress and the worries of the world these days. Okay, so we've been ending each of our psalm lessons with a hymn, with a song, and the one today is perfect because it takes the words of Psalm 91. It's the hymn On Eagle's Wings, and in our hymnal, it's got 3 stanzas. I'll just sing one of the stanzas, but I encourage you to look it up, On Eagle's Wings, and notice that all 3 stanzas pull their lyrics and words straight out of Psalm 91. So here is On Eagle's Wings, and this one has some tricky note jumps. So I will make a joyful noise and I'll sing it in joy, but bear with me if it's not the best of quality. But it's a beautiful, lovely song to end on. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. You who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life, say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock in whom I trust, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. I hope that you can find some peace and comfort as you rest in the palm of God's hand this week. Whatever toils and snares and fears are plaguing you by night or by day, know that God is always with you. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.